You felt it in your chest. That sudden tightness, that strange, quiet alarm. You didn't have a reason, but you knew something was off. You called it intuition, a spiritual discernment, maybe even a warning from God. And maybe you were right. But what if you weren't? What if what you've been calling intuition was actually something else entirely? Something older, something deeper, something that was never born from your spirit, but from your wound. This is the part no one tells you about. The part where the very instincts you trusted the most might not have been spiritual guidance at all, but the lingering voice of past pain, pain that dressed itself up as wisdom, fear that wore the mask of prophecy, and a nervous system so hyper-aware of danger that it labeled love as a threat. Before we go further, take a breath. This isn't a message to make you feel ashamed. This isn't about exposing your weakness. This is about freeing your discernment, because you deserve to hear yourself clearly. And more than anything, you deserve to hear God without the static of survival interfering with his voice. Freud, long before trauma became a widely discussed concept, already hinted that our unconscious, shaped by early pain, often drives our perception of the world. It colors the way we see people, how we hear words, how we interpret silence. In spiritual language, we might say, your past wounds can echo so loudly they drown out the whisper of God. Let's make this real. Imagine you're in a conversation. The other person pauses, seems distant, maybe doesn't respond with the warmth you expected, and instantly, something inside you tightens. You tell yourself, something's wrong. I feel it in my spirit. But pause. Is it truly discernment? Or is it the memory of being ignored, rejected, made to feel invisible? That's where the confusion begins. You've spent your life surviving moments where love wasn't safe, where silence meant abandonment, where disagreement meant punishment. And now, even in moments where nothing dangerous is happening, your nervous system still remembers. It whispers, you've been here before. It sends the signal. Danger is near. And because you've grown up in faith, you interpret that signal through the only language you know, spirituality. But trauma doesn't speak in words, it speaks in reactions. And sometimes, what we call intuition is actually just our body trying to keep us safe, the only way it knows how. That's why the first voice you hear isn't always divine. Sometimes it's protective, sometimes it's panic, and sometimes it's trying to guard you from a danger that no longer exists. It's not your fault. You didn't ask for this, you didn't create this. Your heart, in its deepest desire to stay whole, built these reflexes to protect you. And they worked for a while. They helped you spot patterns, avoid pain, escape situations that looked like ones you've suffered through before. But now, those same reflexes are getting in the way of connection, of healing, of hearing clearly. This is especially painful in spiritual communities, where we're taught to trust the voice of the Spirit, to listen closely to the inner leading, to move when we feel something is off. And that is good, but it becomes dangerous when we can't tell the difference between our fear and our faith. That's why we need to learn, gently, carefully, to ask a new question. Whose voice is this, really? Is it God warning me? Is it the Spirit nudging me? Or is it the child inside me, still scared, still grieving, still begging not to be hurt again? There is no shame in asking that question. In fact, that question might be the first act of healing you've allowed yourself in years. Because to question is not to doubt God. It is to seek Him more clearly, to separate the echo of your past from the whisper of His presence. Let's go deeper with this. Think about how many times you felt led to walk away from someone, or how you suddenly felt the need to protect yourself, shut down, or cut ties. Did you ever stop to ask, was this the Spirit? Or was this me trying not to feel vulnerable again? There's a subtle difference between protection and avoidance, between wisdom and fear. And the line between them gets blurry when trauma has been living inside us, unspoken, for years. You might be surprised how often people confuse the trauma response of hypervigilance with strong spiritual discernment. They always know when something is off. They always sense things about people. But many times, what they're sensing isn't spiritual at all. It's emotional residue, It's a body that has lived through too many silent betrayals, too many unspoken wounds, too many moments where intuition was the only tool available because no one else was there to explain what was happening. You had to survive, and that survival taught you to listen closely to shifts in tone, micro-expressions, distance in someone's eyes. Your body became an expert in reading danger, but now it's reading love the same way. That's not your fault, but it is your opportunity. Because now, with awareness, you can begin to pause. You can begin to breathe before reacting. You can learn to ask, is this moment truly unsafe or just unfamiliar? And most of all, you can begin to invite God into those reactions, not to judge them, but to redeem them. Because He doesn't just speak in clarity, He also speaks in confusion. He doesn't just speak through certainty. He often speaks in the pause, in the tremble, in the moment where you say, I don't know what's mine and what's yours. That moment, that's holy ground, and that's where we'll go in the next part, into the heart of the confusion, into the space where intuition and trauma wrestle, where discernment and defense collide, and where, slowly, gently, you begin to learn that your first reaction isn't always your final truth. Because beneath the voice of survival, a deeper voice has always been waiting, and it's time to learn how to hear it again. You've started to ask the question now, whose voice is this, really? And already, something inside you is shifting. Because the moment you pause long enough to question your internal alarm, your soul begins to differentiate between fear and truth. That space, that tiny breath of awareness, is sacred. It's where clarity begins. But to truly understand the difference between trauma and intuition, you need to go deeper, not just into your thoughts, but into your pattern. Let's be honest, most of what we call discernment doesn't arrive in a holy stillness. It hits us like a jolt, sudden, sharp, a cold wave through the chest, a tightening in the stomach, an urge to pull away or shut down. And because we've learned to respect our feelings, especially in spiritual, we call that jolt a sign. We say things like, my spirit didn't feel at peace. Something felt off in the atmosphere. And sometimes, yes, that may be spiritual insight. But many times, it's not. It's not peace. It's not discernment. It's a triggered memory. And our nervous system sounding an alarm. Even when there's no fire, the human body is designed to protect us. It remembers things our conscious mind has long forgotten. It stores experiences in muscle, in breath, in skin, in tone. So when someone raises their voice a certain way, or when a friend forgets to text back, or when a stranger stares too long, the body doesn't ask questions, it reacts. And if we've never been taught to pause and interpret these signals through self-awareness, we automatically spiritualize them. It's not our fault. Especially in faith communities, we're rarely taught about trauma responses. We're taught that discomfort, warning, that lack of peace, no. That red flags always mean spiritual danger. But trauma can mimic all of that. It uses discomfort to get your attention. Not because something is wrong externally, but because something unresolved internally has been activated. Picture this. You walk into a room. Someone reminds you of a person who hurt you deeply in the past. Maybe their tone, maybe their body language, maybe nothing at all but a vague feeling. Immediately, your chest tightens. You label it, something is off in their spirit. But maybe what's really happening is that your trauma has recognized a familiar shape, and it's bracing for impact. And rather than naming that, we give it spiritual language. Not because we want to lie, but because we want to feel safe. We want to feel in control. That's the seduction of certainty. Trauma loves certainty because certainty feels like safety. If we can name it quickly, we don't have to sit with the discomfort. We don't have to risk being wrong. We don't have to risk being vulnerable. But intuition, real, deep, spiritual intuition, requires presence, not panic. It takes time. It's patient. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. And sometimes it sounds like nothing at all, until you've calmed your nervous system enough to hear it. So how do we begin to tell the difference? By learning to listen to the tone of the inner voice. Trauma has a tone. It speaks with urgency, with fear, with suspicion. It pushes, it accuses, it demands immediate action. Get out of here. Don't trust them. You've been here before. You know how this ends. Trauma doesn't give you time to breathe. It forces you to act, now, to avoid pain. But intuition, even when it warns, does not panic. It's firm but steady. It doesn't threaten. It invites. It allows for space, for silence, for stillness. Intuition may say, "There's something not right here," but it will never scream, "Run, you fool," before it's too late. That's not intuition. That's fear wearing a spiritual robe. Another way to tell, intuition doesn't just react, it observes. It doesn't need to rush into a decision. It can sit in ambiguity. It can coexist with mystery. Because real spiritual insight is rooted in love, not control. And trauma, by nature, is always trying to take back control. Here's something to consider that may be hard to hear. Many of us have confused our trauma responses for the voice of God because we've never experienced love that was safe enough to teach us the difference. So when God's voice is soft, kind, slow, or challenging, it doesn't feel like Him. We look for Him in urgency, in adrenaline, in emotion, but sometimes He's in the calm. And if calm has always felt unsafe for you, you might walk right past Him. So what can you do? First, slow down. When that familiar jolt of intuition hits, don't respond immediately. Pause. Ask, what exactly am I feeling right now? Try to name it without labeling it as spiritual or emotional. Is it anxiety? Is it fear of rejection? Is it anger? Jealousy? Naming it doesn't make it less real. It makes it less invisible. Second, trace the pattern. Ask yourself, have I felt this before? If the answer is yes, go deeper. When? With who? Under what circumstance? You'll often find that the intuition you're feeling now is echoing a situation from your past. It's not prophecy, it's memory. Third, bring it to the surface. Journal it. Pray over it. Speak it out loud. Don't keep it swirling in your chest like fog. Let the fog become words. When you name the experience, you take away its power to control you unconsciously. And once it's named, God can begin to speak into it, not just around it. And finally, ask your intuition to wait. Yes, you can ask it to wait, because if it's truly divine, it will not be offended by your stillness. It will not abandon you in the pause. It will wait for you to catch up to peace. You are not broken for having trauma response. You are not spiritually immature because your body reacts to triggers. You are human, and your humanity is not an obstacle to your faith. It is the ground where your faith grows. In the next part, we'll explore how your body, yes, your physical body, has become the loudest voice in your life, and how your nervous system may be masquerading as your spiritual compass. Because until we understand the language of the body, we will keep misreading fear as discernment and keep missing the deeper peace that's already trying to find its way in. You're not crazy. You're not confused. You're becoming aware, and awareness is where the healing begins. You're beginning to feel it now, not just in your thoughts, but in your body. The tension that rises when someone raises their voice, the unease that settles in your stomach when you walk into a room and sense you don't belong, the sudden chill that rushes down your spine at the sight of a familiar expression, or the echo of a certain tone. You say it's your spirit. You say it's discernment. But what if it's your body remembering what your mind has learned to forget? What if the warning you feel isn't a message from God, but a message from your nervous system? We rarely talk about this in spiritual spaces. The body, its reactions, its sensations, its memory, is often treated as secondary or even suspicious. The flesh, we're told, must be silenced. But the truth is, your body isn't your enemy. It's your ally. It's not trying to lead you astray. It's trying to keep you alive. And when you've been through trauma, especially emotional, relational, or spiritual trauma, your body becomes the loudest voice in the room. Not because it wants attention, but because it was the only one who never stopped listening. Here's something few realize. Your body doesn't know the difference between past and present. It doesn't operate in narrative. It operates in sensation. So when something in the present reminds it of something painful from the past, even in the smallest way, it reacts. Not rationally, not logically. Instantly, it tightens, it pulls back, it freezes, it floods, and those reactions feel so intense, so urgent, that we mistake them for revelation. Let me show you what this looks like. A woman enters a new church. The pastor reminds her, just slightly, of someone who once used religion to control her. The same cadence, the same posture, the same commanding presence. Her chest tightens, her throat closes. Something feels off. She texts a friend later, "There's something dark in that place. My spirit picked it up." But what if her body picked up the memory, not the moment? What if her nervous system screamed danger, and she spiritualized the scream? Or a man begins to date someone new. She's kind, thoughtful, safe. But one day, she cancels plans, doesn't reply to a message for hours. And suddenly, his heart races. His mind spirals. He says to himself, "I knew something was off. God was trying to warn me." But maybe it wasn't God. Maybe it was the part of him that was once ghosted, rejected, or silently abandoned, now reactivated, now on fire. This doesn't mean your body is lying to you. It's not. It's telling the truth. It's telling the truth of your history, not always your present. And unless you learn to decode that message, you will keep confusing fear with foresight. This is why trauma survivors are often the most sensitive people you'll ever meet. Not just emotionally, spiritually. They walk into rooms and sense everything. They feel heaviness, tension, unspoken energy. And yes, sometimes that's a gift. Sometimes it's a form of spiritual discernment. But sometimes, more often than we'd like to admit, it's their body responding to an invisible threat that isn't actually there. And here's where things get tricky. Because if you've grown up in a faith tradition that values intuition and spiritual sensing but never taught you about trauma, you will always default to the spiritual explanation. Not because you're wrong, but because you've never been taught that your body prays too. Your body listens. Your body carries memory and speaks in its own language, a language of muscle and breath, of pressure and release. And for many, the body becomes the first responder, the interpreter of every experience, the gatekeeper of safety. And unless you invite that part of you into the healing process, not just your mind, not just your beliefs, but your nervous system, you'll keep repeating the same cycles of withdrawal, avoidance, or mislabeling emotional triggers as divine warning. Let's pause here, because this matters. God created your nervous system. He designed it to protect you, to adapt to your environment, to alert you to danger. That's not brokenness, that's brilliance. But when the system gets stuck, when it becomes locked in patterns of hypervigilance or shutdown, it stops responding to reality. It responds only to memory. It overfunctions. It tries to protect you from things that no longer require protection. That's why some people can't feel peace, even in peaceful places. Their body has never learned how to receive peace. Because peace isn't the absence of noise, it's the presence of safety. And if your body has never felt safe, it won't let you rest. No matter how spiritual the environment is, you could be at a retreat, a worship service, or alone in prayer, and still feel tension, anxiety, or numbness. Not because God isn't there, but because your body still thinks it's at war. So how do you begin to heal? First, by listening, without judgment. When your body speaks, through pain, tension, fatigue, or even anxiety, don't silence it. Don't label it as weakness or lack of faith. Ask it, what are you trying to protect me from? What story are you carrying that I haven't heard yet? Second, by learning to regulate. Breathwork, grounding practices, slow movement. These are not just new age trends. They are ways to bring your nervous system back into the present, to teach your body that it is no longer in the past, that the danger is over, that it is allowed to soften now. Third, by inviting God into your body, not just your mind. Speak to Him from your tension, from your exhaustion, from your stomach, your chest, your neck. Don't just pray from your head. Pray from your nervous. Let the sigh become sacred. Let the release be worship. And finally, by remembering that you are not broken because you feel too much. You are not weak because your body reacts. You are not spiritually behind because you struggle to trust calm environment. You are someone who survived, and your body made sure of that. But now, your body doesn't have to fight anymore. Not everything you feel is danger. Not every warning is prophecy. And not every reaction needs to be obeyed. In the next part, we'll go deeper into how to distinguish the real voice of God from the voice of your fear. we'll explore the texture, the rhythm, and the tone of divine guidance, and how healing allows you to hear it with clarity, not through the static of survival. Because God hasn't stopped speaking. You've just been trying to listen through the noise of everything you've been through. And now, it's time to turn the volume down. By now, you've started to realize something that changes everything. Not every voice inside you deserves your trust. Some were born out of pain. Some were built to protect you. And some, though they sound like God, are actually echoes of your fear. This part of the journey is delicate, sacred, because now we're entering the most tender place, the space between survival and true spiritual discernment. And in that space, the question becomes clear. How do I tell the difference between the voice of God and the voice of trauma? This isn't about doubting your faith. It's about purifying it. Because many of us were never taught to question how we hear, only what we hear. And that's where confusion begins. We hear a strong, urgent inner voice telling us to cut people off, to leave places, to shut down our hearts. And we call that discernment. But is God's voice really that quick to accuse, that sharp, that unforgiving? No, it's not. The voice of trauma is urgent, defensive, absolute. It rushes, it panics, it operates on an all-or-nothing scale. It says things like, "Get out now. You can't trust them. You've seen this before. Don't fall for it again." And it says it all in a tone that feels incredibly convincing, because it feels familiar. But familiarity isn't the same as truth. God's voice, by contrast, is steady. It doesn't panic. It may challenge you, yes. It may nudge you toward hard decisions, but it does so with clarity, not fear. It speaks from love, not from threat. God's voice allows space for reflection, not just reaction. It invites you to consider, not to collapse. It gives you peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, even when it says something difficult. Let's look at a real-world example. A woman feels something shift in her relationship with a close friend. There's distance, miscommunication. Old fears begin to rise. Her instinct is to back away completely. She prays and hears that it's time to walk away. But when she steps back, something doesn't sit right. Not guilt, grief. That grief isn't always a sign she made the wrong decision, but in this case, it's something deeper. The word, she thought, came from God, actually came from fear, from a part of her that couldn't tolerate uncertainty. That part had learned, long ago, that it's safer to leave first than to be left behind. And now, that voice had spoken again, loudly, convincingly. But what if she had paused? What if she had asked, "Does this voice leave me more connected to peace or more isolated in pain?" The test of God's voice isn't how loud it is, it's how it leaves you. It may lead you into hard things, but it never leads you into shame. It may tell you to set boundaries, but it doesn't turn people into enemies. It may warn you, but not with anxiety in its tone. It warns like a parent, not a prison guard. And most importantly, it never disconnects you from love. This is the filter many of us were never taught to use. Instead, we were told, if it sounds serious, it must be spiritual. If it comes in prayer, it must be divine. If it matches our emotions, it must be the truth. But your emotions can be real and still not be right. And your trauma can be loud and still not be Lord. So how do we begin to know the difference? Start by testing the tone. Ask yourself, is this voice rooted in fear or freedom? Is it leading me toward isolation or integration? Is it affirming my dignity or threatening my safety? Next, notice what the voice demands. Trauma-based voices often demand immediate. They don't want reflection. They want action, now. But God's voice allows for tension. It knows you are human. It knows you need time. It speaks truth without rushing you to run from yourself. Another way to tell is by the fruit it produces. Jesus said, "You'll know a tree by its fruit," and voices have fruit too. If the inner voice you're hearing leads to peace, humility, compassion, and deeper connection with truth, even if it's painful truth, it's likely from God. But if it leads to self-righteousness, suspicion, bitterness, or emotional shutdown, pause. That may be the voice of your past, not the voice of your Father. And here's a powerful question to ask in those quiet moments of decision. Would this voice still make sense if I wasn't afraid? That one question can shift your entire spiritual atmosphere because it breaks the agreement between fear and identity. It reminds you that not all urgency is truth, that not all instinct is insight, and that the God who speaks to you, really speaks to you, doesn't need fear to get your attention. Sometimes the voice of God will say, wait. Sometimes it says, move. But it always says, I'm here, even in the silence, even in the confusion. Even when you can't tell what's yours and what's His, He doesn't withdraw. And that is your anchor. Because the point of this journey isn't to be perfect. It's to be present, to show up, even trembling, and say, God, I want to know your voice, even if I have to unlearn every other one I've trusted until now. That prayer is more powerful than 1,000 affirmations, because it invites a deeper kind of clarity, the kind that comes not from knowing everything, but from being known. In the next part, we'll enter that space of reconnection, of recentering. We'll explore how to rebuild trust with your inner world, and how to recover the true voice of intuition that was never meant to hurt you, but to guide you back to wholeness. You don't need to be afraid of your inner voice. You just need to learn how to hear it again, not through the filter of pain, but through the frequency of peace. And that's where we're headed next. You've walked through the storm. You've peeled back the layers. You've seen how the voice you trusted, the one you thought was divine, was often a shield, a reflex, a memory in disguise. And now, something sacred is happening. Your heart is beginning to open, not to perfection, not to performance, but to the possibility that beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the tension, there's still a voice inside you that is true, a voice that has always been there, waiting, watching, whispering. It's time to find that voice again, not the loudest one, the deepest one, the voice of real intuition. Real intuition doesn't scream, it doesn't panic, it doesn't demand, it feels different. You don't just hear it in your head, you feel it settle in your chest, like water finding stillness after being stirred. It comes after the emotional wave has passed, not during it. It waits for you in the quiet that follows the storm. And when it speaks, it doesn't shake you, it centers you. So how do you reconnect with that voice? You begin by reclaiming your inner space. So many of us have lost access to our inner world. We've been pulled outward for years, by religion, by trauma, by relationships, by fear, always looking for answers out there, for signs, for confirmation, for validation. But real intuition isn't found by looking out. It's found by returning in to the place where your spirit and God's spirit meet, where your body is not silent, but listened to, where your emotions are not dismissed, but honored, where your past is not denied, but seen and healed. This is where the true voice lives. Let me offer you something simple but profound. Your real intuition doesn't fight for attention. That's how you know it's safe. It waits patiently. It trusts you'll return when you're ready. It knows who you are, even when you've forgotten. And it sounds different too. It doesn't say, they're going to hurt you, leave now. It says, take your time, stay grounded, watch with clarity, not fear. It doesn't say, you're not safe here. It says, check in with yourself. What's rising up in you right now, and what does it need? It doesn't say, this person isn't who you thought. It says, let go of who you needed them to be, and see who they actually are. This voice comes not from survival, but from wisdom, not from trauma, but from integration. It's not trying to save you, it's trying to guide you. And the more you listen, the more you'll remember it sounds like. Here's one of the most beautiful truths no one ever told you. Your intuition can heal. Yes, heal. When it's rooted in truth, when it's no longer distorted by fear or guilt, it becomes a channel of restoration. It helps you choose better relationships, safer boundaries, deeper rest. It reminds you what peace feels like before the pain arrives. And it becomes not a reaction, but a rhythm. The rhythm of someone who is no longer fighting to survive, but finally learning how to live. You don't have to keep second-guessing yourself. You don't have to apologize for feeling deeply. You don't have to silence your instincts just because they've been wrong in the past. You just need to slow down, reconnect, and retrain the system inside you to know what safety feels like. Not just the absence of threat, but the presence of truth. And here's where it gets even more powerful. When you heal, your intuition starts speaking not just for you, but for others. You begin to sense when someone is carrying pain they haven't named. You begin to feel when someone's spirit is closed, even if their words are polite. You start to see the real, not through judgment, but through compassion. And this is what makes healed people powerful. They don't use their discernment to control or to defend. They use it to connect, to protect, to love wisely. You'll also notice that as you reconnect with your true intuition, you won't feel the need to explain it to everyone. When the voice is real, you don't need others to validate it. It speaks with such clarity, such calm authority, that it silences the part of you that once needed permission to trust yourself. You begin to walk differently, not louder, not more confidently, but more quietly, with more peace, because now you know. And the beauty is, God meets you there, not in the noise of religious expectation, not in the emotional chaos of trauma triggers, but in the stillness of your healed awareness. That's where you begin to feel the presence of the divine again, not as a force to fear, but as a presence that frees, that reminds you, you are not broken, you are not disqualified, you are not too emotional. You are exactly where you're supposed to be, returning to yourself and finding Him waiting, because God never needed you to silence your body. He needed you to listen to it with Him. He never wanted you to trust voices that kept you afraid. He wanted you to trust the stillness where He speaks without fear. He never demanded that you get everything right. He just asked that you come home to the place where truth lives. So if you've ever wondered whether your intuition is broken, it's not. It's just been bruised, twisted, confused. But now, it's healing. And as it heals, it will become your guide again. Not a guardian against imaginary threats, but a companion on the journey back to peace. You can trust it again. Because you're not reacting anymore. You're listening. You're not running anymore. You're discerning. You're not surviving anymore. You're awakening. And now, from this new space, you get to rebuild your relationship with God, with others, and with your own soul. Not from fear, but from freedom. And that, maybe, is the greatest voice you'll ever hear. The one that says, you're safe now. You're home.